How do I get rid of a dead body if he's still alive? I'm not usually one to post on these sites, but I need your help. I just celebrated my 36th wedding anniversary with my husband, Terry. Terry took me out to eat at Ruby's, where we'd had our first date. We ate steaks, had wine, and even made love. Everything was going great, except one thing. Terry died about 3 days ago. Now, I realize you may be confused at this point. I certainly was at first. He did die. I'm sure of it because I found him. Terry has always been a deep sleeper. He even had a CPAP machine for the last 5 years or so because he slept so deeply he stopped breathing. He had obstructive sleep apnea where his airway was restricted when he laid down. That day was like any other day at first. Since it was our anniversary, I got up quietly, made coffee, and started to get ready for work with the bathroom door closed. Terry usually slept late on Wednesdays, so I didn't think anything odd when he didn't move as I got up. It wasn't until I got out of the shower and went back through the bedroom that things started to feel weird. Terry usually would take his mask off and lay in bed for a few minutes while I showered, and when I came out of the shower, I'd make sure he got up. It was our little routine. Except that morning, when I said, "Happy anniversary, sweetheart, I made some coffee," he didn't move. His CPAP mask was still on, and he looked kind of funny. It was eerily quiet. The CPAP machine usually made this constant, low, roaring sound when it forced air through the tubing and into his mask so Terry could breathe. I'd gotten so used to it, I hardly even heard it anymore. I heard its absence, though. It was dead silent. I had one towel wrapped around my head and another around my body. Both my hands were occupied with keeping those in place, so I bumped his foot with my bare leg, but he was ice cold and stiff. "Terry, babe, are you okay?" But he wasn't. I had to pry that mask off his face and lift him up in the bed to check his heart and his lungs. No heartbeat, no breath. His eyes were closed, thank God, but he'd already started to turn a funny shade of bluish purple. It was a disturbing sight. His face was the worst of it. Along his cheek, red marks lined where his mask had been like he'd tried to claw it off, but couldn't. I was so shocked I couldn't even scream. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even move for what felt like hours, but must have only been a few minutes. My hair was still wet. I don't even remember crying. That's the weird thing. Like I could almost tell myself it didn't even happen, especially after what happened later. I know this is the part where you're going to judge me, but it is what it is. I left him there in the bed and went to work. I didn't know what to do. It's not like I could deadlift him by myself. I wrapped him in the covers he was laying on and shut the bedroom door. Then I drove to work. I must have been in shock. When I got there, Melanie's car was already there, along with some other part-time staff. A few of them were standing by the door since they didn't have a key to get in. I parked and let them in the library and headed to circulation where my office is. When I turned the corner, Melanie stood frozen in the lobby like she'd seen a ghost. She was facing towards the mirrored stairway at the center of the building. She had such a funny look on her face, now that I think about it. When she saw me, she snapped back to her usual smile and waved to me. I waved back. Then I watched her walk back up the stairs. I looked back at the mirror again after she'd left. I had crossed the lobby and walked over near the stairs where the main light switches were. I saw how tired I looked in the image reflected back at me. I hadn't realized how dark the material was before. It had a smoky beauty I'd never noticed. Something pulled me closer. I noticed motion behind me, in the mirror. At first I thought it was just the part-timers coming in for the day, but I turned around and nobody was there. Voices carried out from the break room in the distance. I turned back around. There, right behind me, was Terry. I'm not sure if I was scared or relieved. I just stared at him. I didn't bother to look back. I knew he wouldn't be there. What I did instead was even more surprising to me. I reached out my hand and touched the mirror. My fingers brushed against the cool obsidian surface, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then I felt it. Something was pressing back from the other side. Soft at first, then with more and more pressure. Fingertips came first, then a hand, an arm, a shoulder, then a head. Terry's head, followed by the rest of him. I backed away and couldn't help but stare, open-mouthed. He smiled. My Terry's smile. The one he'd given me the first time we'd met, in this very room. Tanya came around the corner and waved at the both of us. Hey, Dusty. Aw, that's sweet that Terry came with you today. Happy anniversary, guys. Great to see you, Terry. How's the tomato crop this year? Terry smiled, his usual smile. Then he waved. Tanya waved back and moved off around the desk. He didn't move his mouth or his body. I grabbed Terry's hand and walked us out to the parking lot, and we both got into my car and drove away. I called my boss from the car saying that I was sick so I wouldn't have to go back to work. When we got home, the other Terry was still there, wrapped in those sheets. Except something was wrong. The smell was unbearable, like rotten meat. I asked Terry to help me put the other Terry in the closet so he wouldn't stink up the house. For some reason, Terry wasn't speaking still, but he had the same kind eyes and his smile. I realize you may judge me for doing what I did and not getting help or telling anyone outside of this forum. I don't expect you to understand. Terry is all I have. We got dressed that night and celebrated our anniversary like we planned. I had my Terry back. It was a miracle. That was 3 days ago. I haven't been back to work. I read on the news about what happened to Bobby. They said he dug out his eyeballs and carved the words, "Are you scared?" into his chest by the time they found him. He'd crawled into an air duct on the 3rd floor of the library. He'd been muttering something about mirrors, apparently. He had been admitted to the state mental hospital for observation. The news had a field day with the coverage. I had a couple missed calls from friends and colleagues from work, one from an unknown number. Management had contacted the police. There was some kind of investigation. Jesus, I don't know what to do. I can't bring myself to open the closet. I can't lose Terry again. I won't. But I think something is wrong with him, the one that came back. I told him to stay in the guest room until we can figure out what to do. He won't or can't speak. Sometimes he gets angry, like he doesn't know where he is. He's been banging on the wall since the sun went down a couple hours ago. Bang, bang, bang. I don't know what to do. I'm scared if I talk to the police, they'll take Terry away. I'm just afraid he may not have been the only thing that came back through that mirror. Every night, I sleepwalk and try to open a sealed trunk in my apartment. I'm terrified of what will happen when I succeed. First, I have to tell you about the trunk. It belonged to a middle-aged nobody, let's call them Liu, who had an enormous lake house in the woods. It was Braden who told us about the house, said it was full of antique Chinese porcelain and vases and jade and all sorts of valuables. Said that the owner was a recluse who didn't do anything but collect precious objects and hoard them, that the house was practically a museum. But the heist was all Jess's idea, not mine. None of it was mine. Not that it's an excuse for what happened. I'm just saying, I didn't intend for any of this. Nobody did. It's just that the opportunity was there. Because all those old antique vases, that shit was valuable. Braden ran an auction biz. That's how he met Liu, and how he knew that Liu was harmless. A bald-headed hermit of indeterminate gender, Liu was shy and short and nearsighted, and Braden said, "They're like if Piglet from Winnie the Pooh was human and hoarded antiques." More importantly, Liu distrusted technology and feared government surveillance and had no cameras, only a simple alarm system. Here's what we do. We just knock on the door, acting friendly, until the antiques collector disarms the alarm to open it up for us. Easy, claimed Jess. She was the brassy one, and since Liu might recognize Braden, she agreed to be the knocker. Not only was our victim nearsighted, but Jess planned to disguise her appearance with makeup and a wig. After the door was open, I'd lunge and tackle Liu. Then we'd bind Liu's hands with zip ties and lock them in a closet while we looted the house. And at first, everything went off without a hitch. It was all too easy. Just like Braden said, Liu answered the door and surrendered to us like a petrified hare, not even objecting, just shivering until we put the bag over their bald head. The only problem was the closet. The closets were all full of winter supplies or cleaning items or pantry stocks. Then I spotted the trunk, a big, lacquered, antique trunk with designs all across the top and sides. I pointed it out to Jess, and she got a big grin, and we pushed Liu into the trunk and closed and locked it. Then Braden came in and silently pointed us to the most valuable items, and we packed them all up. There was a Qing Dynasty vase worth $5,000, Ming Dynasty jades worth tens of thousands, and so much more. After we left, Braden mentioned one of us should call the cops and tip them off so that Liu wouldn't be left in the trunk. Jess said it shouldn't be one of us. If it got traced back to us, we'd be fucked. And eventually Jess convinced me to talk to my girlfriend at the time, Monique. I told her I'd witnessed a possible break-in, and that I didn't want to call it in myself because I already looked shady, peeking in through the windows. Monique probably suspected something was up. She was reluctant to make the call, but after my wheedling and promising to buy her something nice if she did, she finally agreed. Then we all went out for drinks and celebrated our haul. And since Braden was the one who was going to sell the stuff and get our share to us, he gave me and Jess an advance. It all went off without a hitch. Until a little over a week later, when Braden called. His voice was strained on the phone. "Yo," he said. "You called in that tip, right?" "What? Yeah." A long pause, and then, "I sent my delivery guy to the house. He said no one was home. Lou's not answering the phone either." "Delivery?" I echoed, confused. "Yo, I told you about this last week. I know Lou from auction. They bought an item, and I told them I'd make a delivery. I sent my guy to do it. I was also going to try and get a feel for Lou's reaction to everything, you know? See if they have any suspicions." "Okay. You sure you called in that tip?" "Yes. I mean, Monique, she said she—" "Get here, now." Fuck. On my way to Braden's office, I spoke to Monique. She was at work, and I asked if she'd called in that tip last week like she promised, and she said, "Oh, shoot, babe." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, shoot?" "I didn't even want to make the call, okay? You pressured me into it." "I didn't want to do it, and I was getting worked up about it because it felt weird, and then I forgot. All right? What's the big deal?" "What's the big deal? The big deal is—" I bit off my words, because anything else I said could incriminate me. Monique didn't know any details, just my story about seeing something shady. Yeah, it was weak, but she'd seemed to buy it at the time. All she had to do was call the fucking cops, you know? None of this would have happened if she'd just called the cops like she was fucking supposed to. So there we were, the three of us, Jess and Braden and I, standing in Braden's office screaming accusations at each other. Then Braden said we had to go back to the house and check on everything. Jess was firmly against the idea. Braden said fine, he and I would go since he had a delivery to make anyway. I tried to object, but he told me, "No, you fucked this up, you're coming with me." So we made the drive up to the lake house. And on our way there, winding through the trees, it struck me how isolated the place was. How deep into the woods and nature and all that crap. And how if you were stuck in a closet or inside a trunk surrounded by jade and porcelain, there would be no neighbors to hear you scream. Still, somehow the reality hadn't settled in yet. I clung to the vague notion everything would turn out all right, that we'd break in and open the trunk, and that little bald collector would be petrified and traumatized, but wouldn't recognize me, that somehow they wouldn't know the hands of the person who pushed them into the trunk. What kind of idiot am I that I was worried about being recognized? Then we were at the house. That big, beautiful house with the deck overlooking the lake and the tall glass windows. And everything seemed calm. But the front entrance in the shade of the trees was ominous somehow, and the silence hung too heavy. And Braden and I got out and approached the door, and both of us just stood there for a moment. When we tried the knob, it was locked. We'd closed it behind us when we left a week ago. No, more than that. It had been 9 days. Braden told me to look for another way in. I didn't like being bossed around, but apparently that's how it was since he and Jess both blamed me. So I went around the side of the big house, trying the windows, and to my surprise, the window to the living room slid easily upwards. I froze as I peered through the open window into the dim interior, which looked exactly as we'd left it. And there, still in its place in the corner sandwiched between the sofa and an ornate hutch, was the trunk. Only it appeared to have shifted slightly. It was ever so slightly askew compared to the other items in the room. Compared to the furniture that was almost obsessively positioned, every item in perfect place. The trunk was like a cockeyed picture frame, like something inside had been banging around, knocking it out of position. It was still locked shut. I pulled my head out of the window and looked back at Braden. His face looked exactly how mine felt, tight, heavy with dread. We'd both noticed the smell, a god-awful stink emanating from inside. What's important is that you understand, it wasn't supposed to go that way. Nothing went like how it was supposed to. It was all just a mistake, a stupid fucking mistake. But the real problem, the reason I'm writing this post now, is because of what came next. I don't know what the fuck to do. I can't ask anyone for help, can't go to the police, and here's the real fucking problem. The trunk is in my home. I don't know how it got here. All I know is I woke up one morning and it was in my living room. Wait, let me back up. Before that, we had all these antiques, right? We never saw a dime from them. After Braden and I left the lake house, we didn't speak to a soul. We didn't even talk to each other. It was like we just wanted to forget, to act like none of this had happened and like none of us knew each other. We stopped calling each other or hanging around. All of us felt guilty, I guess, and the antiques are still just sitting in one of Braden's auction storage facilities somewhere. Then one evening, Jess rang, said the trunk was in her living room. I honestly thought she was fucking with me, and I wanted to forget all this trunk bullshit, and I hung up on her. When I got the news she OD'd, it was a shock, but honestly, she'd always been wild. Her death was really fucking sad, but not totally surprising when I thought about it. Then Braden called me. On the phone, he was freaking out, asked if I knew how she died. Yeah, I said. I saw on her socials friends posting about how she'd OD'd. He said not just that, her body had been found inside a trunk, that she'd apparently tucked herself inside before overdosing. I asked if he was fucking with me. It's in my living room, he burst, sounding breathless on the phone. The trunk. I said, that's not fucking funny. I'm not fucking joking. It's here. I'm looking right at it right now. It's here. I told him to quit making shit up, but when he asked me to come over, I did. And we just stood there and looked at it. It was the exact same fucking trunk. Same ornate designs, same scuff marks along the surface and the corners, same crack in one of the mother-of-pearl flowers on the lacquered surface. It was the trunk. I asked him how it got there, and he told me there was nothing on the ring cam. But when he woke up and came into his room this morning, it was here. I asked if he'd opened it, and he gave me a long look. Dread settled deep in my gut. Then, fuck it, I said, and opened the lid. The groan of the hinges, the whoosh of air as it creaked open. It was like a last gasp of someone or something suffocating, as if the damned thing took a breath. But when I looked into the yawning interior, there was nothing. Nobody. And no body either. Just a faint stain and a musty, unpleasant odor. We both stood over it for a long time before Braden's nostrils flared, and he asked me, "Did you do this?" I told him no way. We argued. He said if he went down, I was going down too. I told him it wasn't me. He asked who else knew. Who else could have done it? Did I think a fucking ghost did it? I told him maybe Jess set this whole thing up before she died. If she really had crawled into the trunk before ODing, maybe she did it as a statement, I said, out of guilt, and maybe arranged to have the trunk brought here after her death to punish us. I'm not sure if he believed me, but I'm telling you, like I told him, it was not me. He told me he was going to send the trunk to my house, and I said he'd better fucking not, and that if he did, I'd burn it, and he said, "That's actually a good idea. Help me." I didn't like how he was acting the boss of me, but I didn't like that trunk either, so I helped him. We carved it up with an axe, smashed it all apart, and burned it in the fire pit out back. It smelled like roasting flesh. It was absolutely foul, let me tell you. The way the lacquer sizzled and oozed as it shriveled, it looked like we were burning a corpse, and it smelled like it too. When it was done, I went home. But a few days later, I got a call from one of Braden's coworkers asking if I'd seen him. He hadn't been in to work. I panicked and called the cops for a wellness check. I babbled a little on the phone to them, I think. I was just freaked out. Anyway, the cops did a check on him and found him. In the trunk. He was burned to a crisp. But there were no burn marks on the trunk at all. So you see my dilemma? The trunk. The fucking trunk showed up in my apartment. First thing I did was lock it in my basement storage. But then I thought, what if I get stuck inside it? Who'll hear me scream? So then I put it back in the middle of the living room, and I set cameras on it, watching it. And I put a magnetized alarm on the lid that triggers when it opens. The first night, I woke up around 1 a.m. to the sound of the alarm. I was standing over the trunk, which I had just opened, and it was yawning as if ready to swallow me. I backed up, heart galloping, and my phone rang, and I had to tell the alarm company that everything was fine. It was me. I'd tripped it by accident. Except it wasn't by accident. Apparently, I'd sleepwalked my way over to the trunk and tried to climb in. I didn't sleep a wink the rest of the night. Since then, I've put a padlock on my bedroom door with a numbered combination. I've handcuffed myself to the bed and put the key in a bucket of ice. I've set an alarm on my bedroom door to wake me if I leave. This has worked pretty well so far. Usually, I wake up the moment my arm does the polar plunge for the key. A few times I've woken fumbling at the padlock, and once, when I fell into a really deep sleep after an exhausting day, I woke up only after the sirens exploded in my ears from my opening the door. But then yesterday, it almost caught me. I woke up with the yawning ornamental trunk about to swallow me. It was only the pounding on the door that woke me. A neighbor was banging and screaming. I'd sleepwalked right through the alarm, and to be honest, didn't even hear the sirens at first, until the neighbor asked me if I was fucking deaf, and I realized he was shouting at me, and the reason was so I could hear him over the shrill wail. I turned the sirens off, answered the call from the security company, and then I went to the hardware store. I bought steel bars and welded them around the trunk in a cage so that the lid can't be opened more than a couple inches. But I'm worried it won't be enough. The trunk has started to smell. I mean really, really smell. And sometimes it moves. It jerks and thumps inside its steel cage, like there's something inside it. Or someone. Someone trapped. I'm afraid to get rid of it. I'm certain if I dump it, it'll just return. I already know what happens if I burn it. Sometimes I have dreams in which I'm the one inside it, thumping, screaming, begging to be let out, but nobody is around to hear me. And one of these days, I'm afraid I won't wake up from that dream.